May 1945. The war ends, and a new question explodes across the world. What do you do with nearly 50,000 American Sherman tanks spread from Normandy to the Pacific, more than any other tank built by the West? Some vanished into scrapyards and were melted into Chevrolets and Fords, while others were silently lined up in hidden depots or handed off to new armies, seemingly forgotten, yet ready to shape global conflicts for decades. How did these symbols of victory become the most recycled and resurrected war machines of the century? The real story of what happened next has never truly been told, until now. Across Europe in 1946, American officials faced a mountain of armored steel with no peacetime purpose. Government memos and War Assets Administration contracts authorized the disposal of thousands of Sherman tanks, most less than 5 years old. The logic was economic and relentless. Each tank held nearly 30 tons of high-grade steel, copper wiring, and engine parts that American industry desperately needed. Scrapyards from Antwerp to New Jersey filled with the gutted remains of war machines, their turrets and hulls auctioned in bulk lots. Detroit automakers lined up with purchase orders, eager to turn surplus armor into the raw material for a booming post-war consumer market. Steel from Shermans poured into the furnaces of Chevrolet, Chrysler, and Ford, reappearing months later as bumpers, chassis, and refrigerators. The process was so efficient that by the end of 1946, entire battlefields had been cleared, their tanks reduced to ingots and sheet metal. In Britain, returned Lend-Lease Shermans met the same fate, while Canadian forces left their entire fleet behind and passed them on to Dutch and Belgian armies rather than ship them home. The result was a rapid, nearly invisible vanishing act, as the most common Allied tank was erased from European landscapes and reborn as the backbone of American consumer goods. This deliberate purge set the stage for the scarcity that would later drive desperate salvage operations in scrapyards and depots around the world. Not every Sherman vanished into a furnace. In the chaos after the war, careful hands set aside thousands of tanks, quietly building up reserves that would shape conflicts for decades. Canadian military planners, facing the cost of shipping armor across the Atlantic, made a fateful calculation. Instead of repatriating their wartime fleet, they left every Canadian Sherman behind in Europe. Dutch and Belgian armies, rebuilding from occupation, received these tanks by the trainload. Maintenance logs from 1946 show entire battalions transferred on paper and in steel, with engines still warm from their last patrol. While Europe was shedding its armored weight, American officers in the Pacific made different choices. Occupation forces in Japan kept hundreds of Shermans in sealed depots, preserved under tarps and periodic inspection. These tanks, listed in depot manifests as combat-ready, were maintained with fresh batteries and full fuel tanks. Officially, they were insurance against unrest. Unofficially, they became a forgotten arsenal, their presence recorded in quarterly inventory reports, but absent from public view. Elsewhere, the scrapyard ecosystem took on a life of its own. Salvage crews in Italy and France stripped wrecked Shermans for parts, but some hulks escaped the torch, stashed in fenced yards, or passed quietly to new owners. These dormant tanks, abandoned, reassigned, or simply overlooked, would prove invaluable when new wars called for instant armor. The decisions of depot planners and quartermasters, made in the shadow of peace, created a hidden network of steel that waited, out of sight, for the next emergency. On July 17, 1950, a handful of U.S. Army officers walked into the dusty tank parks of Japan with a single order: find every Sherman that could still run. The invasion of South Korea had caught American forces flat-footed, their armored strength scattered and mothballed after years of peacetime drawdown. Depot manifests listed Shermans by serial number, but only a fraction were ready to move. Mechanics pried open hatches, checked batteries, and drained fuel tanks that had not been touched since the occupation began. In less than 48 hours, crews identified 58 M4A 3E8 EZ8 Shermans, late war models with improved suspension and 76mm guns, scattered across 6 depots from Yokohama to Sasebo. Most needed repairs. Some had missing radios or cracked periscopes, but the urgency left no room for waiting on parts. Logistics officers at the Tokyo Ordnance Depot authorized a crash rebuild. Technicians worked around the clock, stripping spare track links from wrecks, welding on makeshift stowage racks, and cannibalizing parts from tanks too far gone to save. First aid kits, exhaust deflectors, and travel locks were left off if they were not absolutely essential. The goal was simple: get the tanks across the Sea of Japan as fast as possible. Orders arrived to activate the 8,072nd Tank Battalion, an ad hoc unit assembled from occupation troops and anyone with tank experience. Training would happen on the move. By the end of July, the first batch of Shermans, 58 in total, was loaded onto landing ships bound for Busan. On August 1st, 1950, they rolled ashore, engines still warm from the depot floor. The process did not stop there. As the fighting intensified, more tanks followed. By December, 679 M4A3E8 Shermans had landed in Korea, each one a testament to the speed and improvisation of crisis logistics. What began as a desperate inventory search became a full-scale armored deployment, driven by the relentless demands of war and the ingenuity of those who refused to let these tanks become relics. Tank crews in Korea faced a battlefield where every decision counted. On paper, the American M4A3E8 Sherman and the Soviet T-3485 looked evenly matched. Yugoslav penetration tests confirmed it. The Sherman's 76mm gun could punch through the T-34's armor at 900 to 1,100 meters. The T-3485's 85mm gun could do the same to the Sherman at similar ranges. But in the chaos of real combat, the numbers only told half the story. American crews brought an edge that statistics alone could not measure. Their tanks carried HVAP, high-velocity armor-piercing rounds with tungsten cores. These shells hit harder and flew flatter, giving gunners a crucial advantage. From July through November 1950, after-action reports credited Shermans with knocking out 41 enemy tanks using HVAP alone. The total for the year reached 97 T-3485 tanks destroyed by U.S. tank units, a staggering toll for a design nearly a decade old. Optics played a silent but decisive role. Sherman gunners could spot targets and fire accurately at the far end of their effective range, while many North Korean crews struggled with fogged sights and poor visibility. Training mattered too. American units drilled relentlessly on range estimation and coordinated fire, often getting the first shot and making it count. Yet the greatest threat did not always come from another tank. Minefields laced the Korean countryside, invisible and deadly. 70% of Sherman losses in 1950 came from mines, not enemy guns. Crews learned to dread the sudden jolt of a track blown off, the sickening tilt as a 30-ton tank lurched to a stop. Recovery teams worked day and night, patching up hulls and replacing bogies. But every mine strike meant one less tank at the front. For the men inside, the lessons were brutally clear. Firepower and armor mattered, but survival often depended on quick eyes, steady nerves, and a bit of luck. The data from Korea would shape every upgrade and engineering decision that followed, as armies worldwide searched for ways to keep their Shermans and their crews alive on the next battlefield. In the summer of 1948, Israeli mechanics stared down a yard full of rusted hulks and saw possibility where others saw junk. Their first Sherman, nicknamed Mir, arrived as a battered British wreck, more monument than machine. With no access to spare parts or working cannons, the team improvised. Engines came back to life with scavenged components, and wiring was patched with whatever could be found. The original guns were ruined, so they turned to Swiss Krupp 75mm field pieces, adapting them to fit the battered turrets of the Shermans. Each tank became a custom job, welded and wired together by hand, with nothing but ingenuity and desperation to guide the process. In November 1948, Israeli agents quietly bought 35 more Shermans from Italian scrapyards. Officially, they were listed as tractors, a paper disguise to slip past embargoes. The tanks arrived missing guns, with breeches destroyed and turrets frozen in place. Workshop crews stripped them down, rebuilt transmissions, and replaced ruined armaments with whatever could be sourced. Over the next 8 years, additional hulls trickled in from France and other European depots. By 1956, more than 200 Shermans had been rebuilt or rearmed. forming the backbone of Israel's armored corps. What began as a salvage operation became a crash course in battlefield engineering, turning scrapyard relics into a force that could hold a line or break one when it mattered most. By the mid-1950s, Israeli ordnance engineers faced a stubborn reality. Their growing fleet of Sherman tanks, salvaged from scrapyards and surplus depots, could not stand up to the latest Soviet armor pouring into the Middle East. The answer came from a French workshop, where the AMX-13's 75mm CN-75-50 gun had proven both lightweight and powerful. Israeli teams began the painstaking work of adapting this gun to the Sherman's turret, a process that meant cutting, reinforcing, and rebalancing the aging steel. The result was the M50 Super Sherman. Around 300 tanks received the new French 75mm gun, dramatically improving their ability to penetrate enemy armor. At the same time, the original gasoline engines, underpowered and prone to overheating in desert conditions, were swapped for robust Cummins 5.8 diesel engines, each producing 460 horsepower. The upgraded tanks also gained HVSS suspension, giving them better traction and a smoother ride over rough ground. Not long after, Israeli designers set their sights even higher. The M51 Sherman was born by fitting a massive 105mm Model F-1 gun, originally built for the AMX-30, into the Sherman's reworked turret. This transformation required an oversized muzzle brake to tame the recoil and careful weight distribution to keep the tank stable. Only 180 Shermans could handle this upgrade, but those that did emerged as some of the most heavily armed tanks in the region. Both conversions kept the 5-man crew and relied on the same diesel engine and improved suspension, blending 1940s reliability with 1960s firepower. These engineering leaps turned battlefield salvage into a credible armored threat, ready for the next round of conflict. On June 5, 1967 at Abu Agela, more than 60 Israeli Shermans, M50 and M51 models, charged into Egyptian defensive lines. The ground shook under the weight of tanks designed in the early 1940s, now fitted with French guns and diesel engines. Egyptian crews faced a storm of fire. By the end of the day, Israeli forces had destroyed over 60 enemy tanks and inflicted 2,000 casualties. 19 Israeli tanks were lost, 8 to direct combat, 11 to mines. The numbers told a story. A tank born for World War II could still win battles a quarter-century later, if its crews knew their machines and the upgrades held. But the clock was running out. In October 1973, the Yom Kippur War erupted. Israel, outnumbered 3-1, pulled 341 reserve Shermans from storage and sent them to the Golan Heights. These tanks, some older than their drivers, faced a new generation of Soviet armor, T-62 tanks and T-55 tanks, and the deadly AT-3 Sagar missile. Reserve crews fought with skill and nerve, destroying around 260 Syrian tanks in brutal, close-range battles. Yet losses mounted. Modern anti-tank weapons sliced through the Sherman's armor. Survivors limped back, scarred by shrapnel and fire. The old tanks had reached their limit. What had worked in 1967 now came at a terrible cost. The battlefield made it clear, even the most adaptable design could not outrun time forever. In 1947, Chile's army took delivery of 30 Sherman tanks, setting the foundation for an armored force that would quietly outlast nearly every other Sherman fleet in the world. As neighboring militaries modernized, Chile found new ways to keep its aging tanks relevant. By the late 1970s, the country acquired close to 100 Israeli M51 Shermans, machines already upgraded with diesel engines and powerful 105mm guns. Chilean engineers pushed further. In 1983, they introduced the M60 variant, fitting some Shermans with a French-designed 60mm HVMS gun. This weapon, surprisingly light but exceptionally fast, could defeat the frontal armor of a Soviet T-62 at distances up to 2,500 meters. Chilean tank officers, many trained on both new and old platforms, kept these Shermans in frontline service alongside modern AMX-30s and Leopard 1s. The last Chilean Shermans were finally retired between 1999 and 2003. From the first deliveries in the aftermath of World War II to their final years at the edge of the 21st century, Chile's Shermans served for more than half a century, a testament to adaptation, resourcefulness, and the enduring value of a well-built machine. In the late 1970s, Argentina's defense ministry faced a pressing challenge. With border tensions rising, military planners turned to their vast stockpile of Sherman tanks, over 400 strong, many acquired from Belgian surplus after World War II. Instead of retiring these aging vehicles, Argentine engineers launched a sweeping upgrade program called Repotenciado, Repowered. From 1976 to 1978, workshops across the country transformed 252 Shermans into modernized fighting vehicles. The heart of the upgrade was a French Peugeot diesel engine, delivering 520 horsepower and far greater reliability than the original gasoline motors. For firepower, the Repotenciado received the 105mm CN 10557 gun, a weapon compatible with NATO standard ammunition and proven on the French AMX-13. Crews gained new confidence in their tank's ability to match contemporary threats. The modernization did not stop with engines and guns. Suspension, optics, and communications were all improved to meet the demands of South American terrain. These Repotenciados remained in frontline Argentine service until 1994, a testament to the country's determination to extract every ounce of value from its wartime arsenal. In April 2018, the last Sherman tank rolled out of a Paraguayan army depot for the final time. Paraguay first received 3 Shermans from Argentina in 1971, and later traded up for upgraded Repotenciado models with 105mm guns in 1988. For decades, these tanks sat quietly in storage, occasionally reactivated for training or for national celebrations. In 2015, mechanics brought them back to running order, a brief encore for a platform older than most of its crew. When the official retirement came, it ended not just a chapter for Paraguay, it closed the operational history of the Sherman worldwide. Far from the headlines, the very last Shermans to serve in a national army were quietly decommissioned, 77 years after the first prototype left an American factory. Elsewhere, the echoes of the Sherman's legacy lingered. Nicaragua's Sandinistas had fielded Shermans in the fighting of 1978 and 1979. On the subcontinent, Indian and Pakistani armies had sent them into battle as late as 1971. But with Paraguay's farewell, the era of the Sherman as a fighting machine was over, leaving only memories, museum pieces, and the stories of those who kept them running, long after their time was supposed to have passed. Military technology rarely outlives the generations it was built to serve. Yet Shermans, born as wartime expedients, outlasted empires and doctrines, shaping conflicts on 5 continents for over 70 years. Today, as modern weapons age out in years instead of decades, the Sherman's legacy reminds us, adaptability outlasts perfection. The true measure of power is endurance, not just innovation. What will endure from our era? Let me know your thoughts below.